Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. You are joining myself, Cade Williamson, as well as Blake once again. Blake is actually joining us for this recap today. Him and I are going to be doing the start of the recap here of this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast, but we have a massive, massive jam-packed show today for this one. We're going to start off with the Week 12 recap, and then we're going to get Tyler in to help us with the preview, our part one of the preview for Week 13, Rivalry Week. We go very in-depth. We're talking a lot about a lot of the games. We're going to talk about the weekday games in this episode of our part one of our Week 13 preview. We'll have another episode, though, on Friday that will be dropped. That'll be talking about our Saturday games, our part two of Rivalry Week, our breakdowns there, our preview there. But let's waste no time. Let's get into our Week 12 recap. And obviously the biggest game around the country this weekend, Washington defeats Oregon State. Washington, very, very good position for the Huskies right now. Still undefeated in the season. They have the best strength of record in the country as it looks right now. They defeated Oregon State, went on the road. We all three picked Oregon State. Washington continues to defy us, and this was a really sloppy game overall. Pouring down rain, really cold in Corvallis, but Washington gets the job done, and I'll ask you, Blake, what did you see in this ball game?
Yeah, this obviously, as you said, just an absolute slop fest of a game with the weather there. Downpouring rain, some winds were going around in Corvallis that were making it just a tough place to play. And it showed because those teams the offenses struggled there. And it wasn't, it just because of the conditions. It was just a bad condition to play in. The ball pretty tough to hold on to, as we saw numerous times there. A handful of fumbles there, a couple back-to-back plays, if I remember correctly. They just kind of rattled them off there. It was just tough to hold on to the football. And that was kind of the detriment of the day, though, for Oregon State. Minus two turnovers really, really hurt that team, especially when they resulted in some points for Washington there. But even through that, Washington was not able to pull away from this Oregon State team by any means. And they had numerous opportunities to. Washington's defense they came to play this weekend. First of all, because even though yes, the weather was bad, and that was a big part of the problem for Oregon State. Washington's defensive front lived in the backfield for a good amount of this game. That stood out to me for sure. That I didn't expect to see them really win up front there in the pass game, at least against that Oregon State offensive line. But they put DJ under pressure a solid amount during this game. Some good blitz schemes and really just even winning in straight rushes. So that was surprising to me. So I'm impressed by that. Braylon Trice had himself a very big game. I've been waiting for him to break out kind of all season. He's just been kind of there. And I thought he was going to be the key point of this Washington defense all year long. And so we finally saw some of that, which was good to see, especially late in the season when we're going to have a potential Oregon rematch, but maybe depending on how this weekend goes. We'll talk about those games later, obviously, that could set that up. But you're going to need some pressure throughout the rest of the season if you want to have a chance. And so Braylon Trice kind of having that breakout game that we've been all waiting on. Good to see there, and the pass rush in general having that breakout is good. But they gave Oregon State every opportunity to not just get back in this game, which Oregon State was able to take those. They were able to get back into this game from being down about 12, I think it was. Um, but they also gave Oregon State the opportunity to win this game throughout most of the or throughout about the second half of the third quarter and through pretty much all of the fourth quarter. Washington's offense, with the conditions and with a solid Utah defense there, just couldn't get anything going down the stretch. And they kept giving the football back to Oregon State, sorry, and giving them a chance to drive. And Oregon State just never really did it. They drove down at one point, put a field goal to make it a 2-point game. They got the football back, I believe, twice after that. Once it was a quick drive that resulted giving the football back to Washington. They then get it back with about 5 minutes to go and with a chance to drive down and win the football game. And it was just really it was a tough drive to watch because the whole time I was sitting there watching it just wondering what the lack of urgency was all about there. You have 5 minutes on the clock and you're down two. I understand that you don't want to give what's been a potent Washington offense all year, time to go down and respond, but you're still down 2 points. and the conditions have been so bad, your defense has played well enough that you don't know that Washington's going to be able to drive down there. So they worked with no urgency. They burned 3 minutes off the clock before they even got to about midfield, um, which at that point they stalled out. They ended up having a third down play that made it 4th and 7. They had no urgency to get to the line on that fourth down. They burned up the entire play clock pretty much there. And it was a down at 2 minutes. They didn't convert on that fourth down play. Pressure got in the backfield on DJ, and he just kind of threw it up and hoped, and it didn't get there to his receiver. So they turned it over on downs. Washington got the ball back. And then they had a third down for the Huskies that gave Oregon State the opportunity to get off the field. Oregon State could not convert there. It was a good ball to Rome Odunze, who just strong-handed took it away and pulled it in to get the first down conversion to end the game uh, and to win it for Washington. So, it's about what I expected. I thought Oregon State would win this game, and you can't predict the turnovers necessarily. So, without those turnovers, I think we're looking at a different game. But the weather played into it pretty big. So it is what it is. You wonder, what could have been with a little more urgency for Oregon State, and that still really puzzles me out of what Jonathan Smith was seeing there. But a good season for the Beavers there, and still one more big game left for them before the bowl season. But I'm impressed with Washington. I'm impressed with their ability to keep just staying alive. I said last week I thought they were going to stumble. They keep stumbling and they keep stumbling, but they haven't fallen yet. And I thought last week was going to be the week. It wasn't. I thought this week was going to be the week, and they survive again. So they have one last game to stand up and against the Washington State this weekend. So we'll see how that goes. But up until the Pac-12 tie game, so good for Washington. They hold serve once again, um, and they keep proving me wrong. So we'll see how it goes the rest of the way for them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Washington State is that it's a bend don't break mentality for this team, and you at this point you just kind of got to respect them because they keep winning. Somehow they keep winning. Everybody's kind of called this team out a little bit. They've thought that this team is not as good, but they keep winning, and you still got to respect that. I mean, they've had countless games. Really, since that Arizona game, every single game that they have played has been a one-score game, and they have won that game. It's almost kind of similar to how the Minnesota Vikings were last year. Kind of the narrative around this Washington team is kind of around that Minnesota Vikings team in the NFL last year, where they just would win those one-score games, and it kind of seems like somebody's waiting for Washington to be exposed. I don't really know if you can expose this team at this point, unless you just force turnovers, because the offense is gonna be fine and for this Washington team. Yeah, Penix is kind of got off the horse as much as he started the season but Washington is still been there with that offense. They still got Rome Odunze. They still got Jalen Polk. They've got these guys that are on the outside that are they're studs. There's no other way to put it. They're guys that are going to be guys playing on Sundays. I thought Washington was the better team in this football game. You're right. They did give Oregon State countless opportunities to win the ball game as well as get back into the ball game. But Oregon State, like you said, just no sense of urgency in the ball game to really come back and win the game. It was just kind of like, we kept it close with Washington, but they're undefeated. They're still a really good team. They're ranked 5th in the country. I mean, I don't know. It was a very interesting game to me because it just kind of felt to me like Washington should have won this game by about 10. They won it by 2. But, they did what they needed to do in this ball game. It just makes me really question what Oregon State can do in a multifaceted offensive sense, which they're going to be put to the test in their following, or then this week actually against Oregon, which we will get into later in the show, obviously. But Oregon State just, I don't know. It's just another week where they have that opportunity to really separate themselves from the pack, and they can't. And Washington, on the opposite end, just keeps doing what they need to do right now. And that's all you got to do is just keep winning. Obviously, it's going to be all eyes are going to be on 2 weeks from now for Washington as they with this win lock up a spot in Las Vegas for the Pac-12 title game. It's not seen of who they're going to play yet. The two teams have been narrowed down. It's either Oregon or Arizona. Two teams that they have beat by, I believe, a combined 10 points this year. The Arizona game was the game before Oregon, and that's before Arizona figured things out. And, I know you and I, Blake, are very high on this Arizona team this year. And we'll get to them a little bit later in the recap. But Washington just keeps doing what they need to do. And speaking of teams doing what they just need to do, Texas does the same thing that Washington does. They just keep doing what they need to do. They go to Ames in what looked like to be a very tough game. I know, Blake, you picked this upset for the Iowa State Cyclones. Did not go their way. Tyler was super close on this game. Predicted it 27-17. The final was 26-16. But Texas just they were out front for a majority of this game. And they were the better team than Iowa State in this game. And they ended up taking the victory. But what are your thoughts after watching this game?
Yeah, to me, Texas was the second most impressive team this weekend, behind only Auburn. It was impressive what Auburn was able to do to lose that game in such horrific fashion. Sorry, Auburn fans, had to throw that out there. No, but Texas was really the most impressive team for me this weekend. What I thought was going to be with this game was that they weren't going to be able to pull away early like they've been doing against the past several opponents, which is what happened. Iowa State kept it close. They went into halftime, 6-3 in favor of Texas, right? With Iowa State getting the ball all the half, so it was a close game all the way through that first half there. But the whole time, it felt like Texas was the better team. You could see them just continuing to lean and lean and lean on Iowa State, and just waiting for them to finally topple over. And by the time the fourth quarter rolled around, it was inverted from what we've seen from Texas. What we've seen is them fall apart in the late third and through the fourth quarter, let teams come back into the game, tie it up sometimes, and then just answer back at the last minute and pull the game out at the end. But instead, in this one, you see Texas in about the early to mid third quarter, they take that lead, and then they never relinquish it from there on. And in the back half of the game, they really, really took it over, and Iowa State had nothing in the tank for them by the end. Um, and Texas opened it up, not as much in the score. I mean, it ended up being a 10-point affair at the very end there, when it was a little closer all game. So the score opens up a little bit for just the eye test, the on-field product. You just saw Texas really dominate Iowa State in the second half. So that is by far the most impressive thing I saw from any of the contending teams this weekend, is that Texas was able to invert what their issues have been all year long, or these last several weeks, and that they put a game away when it mattered. And really, that game that I think everybody kind of thought was the biggest threat to them until we get to the Big 12 title game, and maybe even until we get to the playoff. This may have been a bigger threat than even the Big 12 title game will be, depending on who they play. So, really impressed with what I saw from Texas. Even more that rushing defense, it's been stout all year, but 3 rushing yards I think they allowed against Iowa State. Just incredible. An incredible effort from that team. Rocco Beck did throw it around on them a decent amount, um, but it just ultimately didn't matter. When you don't allow a team to run for anything, you can allow 300 yards through the air and be okay, and that's what they did, and they were still okay. So yeah, there's still a little bit of concern in the back half there. Of course, a little bit of that was a breakdown and Texas defense on one of those plays that allowed for that to happen. Um, but really, if you can stop the run like that, then you can give up a little bit of that pass game and still be okay. So yes, there's still questions there with that, but Texas, responded to a lot of the concerns about them this weekend, and if they can do it again this coming weekend against Texas Tech, then they cement themselves back in as more than just a playoff spot contender. They can put themselves back on the conversation as being, a true national title contender with how open this year is.
Yeah, you're right about that. Texas just kind of looked like you said, it was really impressive for them to finally really close out a game, because that's where they've struggled. They struggled in those third and fourth quarters, against TCU, against Kansas State, and they came out and they just kind of pulled away in that sense of the ball game against the Iowa State this weekend, which is tough to do in a night game at Ames. It's not an easy task to do that. Obviously, another team in orange, almost 12 years ago to the day, was in a similar situation in Oklahoma State. Texas just this team is a very good football team, and obviously they're probably in a pretty decent position right now. um, to make. I don't know if they control their own destiny, but they're in a spot right now where all they got to do is win two more games, and they're likely in a really good position to make the college football playoff. Obviously, things can happen, and we don't know how things are going to happen. But all Texas needs to do is just keep taking care of business. They've done it all year, and I don't know if things are going to change in that sense. Texas is, to me, this year they've finally just accessed that potential that we've seen in Texas over the recent years, and it's a good thing for college football. It is a good thing for college football. They obviously this year they have that win over Bama, probably the best win in the country. I think it's the best win in the country this year, period, in my opinion. I think that's by far and away the best win, and I think the second best win is Washington over Oregon at home. Um, those are really good wins in the country this year, and for Texas to have that win in the country and have that win over Alabama, that puts them in a very good position right now when you look at their playoff hopes. Because if they win the Big 12 and somehow let's say Alabama beats Georgia, Texas probably, if it comes down to a question between Texas and Bama, what do you look at? When you look at how close these teams are, who won head to head? And it was Texas, and it was at Alabama's place. And I understand it was early in the season, but that Texas has that win. Texas has that best win in the country, and right now it's working wonders for them. And that win might propel them to a playoff spot. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, but Texas just keeps doing what they need to keep doing, and that's winning. But to another game with importance to title game hopes. First off, I will say this: Clemson takes care of business over North Carolina this weekend. That was the game. I believe we all picked Clemson, and Clemson just kind of, handled that team. They were ahead in a majority of that ball game, and they were the better team in that ball game. And they won, rightfully so, in that ball game. So that left a game a little earlier in the day in the hands of a certain team of locking up their ACC title hopes, and that was Louisville. All Louisville had to do really with the outcome that ended up happening down in Clemson, South Carolina, was beat Miami, and a very empty Hard Rock Stadium on a Saturday. Not a shocker, but Louisville traveled to Miami. Very, very close ball game. Two very, very competitive teams, and the Cardinals sneak out a victory 38-31 on the road. They lock up their spot in the ACC champ game, and Louisville, it's a good win for them, but Miami, once again, they can't seem to bounce back.
Yeah, so I have some strong opinions on Miami and what I saw out of them and some decisions by Mario in that game. But before I do that, I don't want to gloss over what Louisville just did by any means. And Jeff Brom's first year there, a Louisville guy through and through, born there, grew up there, played there, had a great career there, and has now come home to coach there. He's taken them to an ACC title game in his first year. Just an incredible job with that. They've played some close games. They've lost that game to Pitt in pretty ugly fashion. And I think obviously that's kind of what's keeping them out of the playoff conversation at this point. Probably not a playoff caliber team, admittedly, but the resume is there. They've been incredibly impressive. Um, they're going to put up a good fight, I think, in the ACC title game against Florida State, and we'll talk about that when the time comes here in a couple of weeks. But just incredible job what Braum has done there and what that team has done this year. Jack Plummer's played really good football for a lot of this season. Uh, didn't expect him to play at the level he has, so good for him as well. That whole team has just been really good story. And they keep answering the calls when need be too. These close games, they play Virginia close last week on what was it, a Thursday, maybe a Friday. It was a midweek game, I know, or a pre-weekend game at least. Um,
It was a
and they
Thursday
come
game.
out on a Thursday game. Yeah, okay, so it was a Thursday game, and they played that game close, really actually trailing until the very end there, and they storm back and get the win. To put it to this weekend, where all they had to do was beat Miami, and Miami leads a lot of this game. Looks better for a good amount. They picked themselves up off the mat like I didn't think they'd be able to do, but they did it anyway. And then finally, Louisville, just at the very end, they break away and they get that late game lead, and they hold it at the goal line there at the end. So good for Louisville. in that regard. But Miami and Mario Cristobal, I've been a pretty strong defender of Mario Cristobal all year. He's made some questionable decisions on the field, and I haven't, denied that. But I keep saying that, the situation he's got Miami in from where they were under Manny Diaz, is pretty impressive. Manny Diaz, great defensive coordinator, but was not doing a particularly good job there as the head football coach. So the situation there was not great. But Mario's come in after a rough last year, in his first season back at his alma mater as well. Played it, and they've played some close games. They've lost some close games. They've rebuilt that program to an extent, but his on the field coaching decisions have been nothing short of horrific. If he was not doing what they are doing in their recruiting and what they are doing program wise, building back up, uh, there would be talk about him being relieved of his duties this season because his on-field coaching has been terrible. I just can't sugarcoat it anymore. Or I can't sugarcoat it. I can't defend it anymore. There has to be massive changes made in that coaching staff, at least, or in the administration part of that staff, and some of the decision making part of that staff, uh, with regards to certain decisions with time management, with timeout management, clock management, with aggression management, because Mario has no clue what he's doing in those situations. He's always struggled in that regard. At Oregon, we talked about some of the blunders at Oregon that he made back when they had that collapse against Georgia Tech earlier this year. We brought up some of those from the past then. Um, but even this year, they just keep coming back and more and more. They're on the goal line. I think they're at the 4 yard line with not much time left on the clock, but they have all three timeouts. It's a fourth down play to score a touchdown that will allow them to tie the game, assuming they make the extra point, or to go for the win, potentially if you want to, if you go for two. Um, and with about 10 seconds left on the play clock, he calls a timeout and burns one of those three timeouts. So you go from, you want the touchdown there because you want to get the football, or you want to not have to worry about getting the football back to have a shot. But you can because you've got all three timeouts and your defense has played, a pretty decent game throughout, and you've got them pinned deep as well. Well, you burn your timeout. So now, number one, with about, I think it was under 2 minutes. So you burn that timeout. You have to score here at this point. You don't convert. It's a ball in the back corner of the end zone. Ends up incomplete. Louisville gets the ball back, and not only that, that's when the tempers boiled over as well. There was still a very small chance they would have only been able to get the ball back with around 20 seconds left, but it's still, a chance at it. Um, and you then end up you commit a personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct after that play. So it moves the ball from the 5 to the 20. And then you actually do get the ball back. You get the ball back within 20 seconds that you needed, um, instead of the about minute that you would have had if you had all three timeouts. And on the punt, another personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct after the play. So you go from getting the ball at what could have been about the 50-yard line without those two personal fouls. Instead, you're starting at your own 20, and there is no real shot at a Hail Mary at that point. So he did not keep his team under control at the end of that game. Not ideal by any means. And his management, once again, has just come into extreme question because what are you burning that time out for there? So changes have to be made in that staff in order to help him in those situations because he'll have this team at the level of competing for an ACC title and for potentially the playoff down the line here. They'll have the talent that they need to, and they'll be developed like they need to do that. But if they get into tough games with top opponents, Mario's game management and decision making will not win them those games, and it will frequently lose them those games. It is a problem, and changes need to be made there. So that was my biggest takeaway from this game, truthfully.
Yeah, it Miami with the talent and the way that this team has been built, you'd expect something better than I want to say even the outcome that they've got this year. and even better would have been 9-3. 8-4 even to an extent, and now the best that they can get is 7-5, and they still got a game against another team that's bowl eligible, in rivalry week that we'll talk about later in the episode. But you know, Louisville just kind of I don't know how this team has made the ACC championship game is my initial thought after this game, because I've seen this team play, and I constantly doubt this team personally. I know they've got a fantastic run defense. I know that Thrash on the outside has been a fantastic receiver for them, and I know that Jack Plummer has not been too bad for them this year. He hasn't. And obviously Jeff Brom's their coach, and I respect the hell out of Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom is, being a Big Ten, being from Big Ten country, I'm familiar with Jeff Brom and what he's done, with his past program at Purdue, and then going to Louisville and immediately just turning that team. It's a great story. It is, and I keep touting this team, and this team, I did pick them this week, but I still doubt them. And they win. They keep winning. They grind it out, and now they got a chance to win the ACC. They've likely locked up a New Year's Six appearance, regardless of what happens against Florida State in the Orange Bowl. But for Louisville, it's a great position for them. It's a great story for them. While Miami, the same things just keep getting reiterated, as you said. It's the same thing over and over again for Miami. It's high expectations in the offseason, great recruiting classes, and then you go 7-5 or 6-6, or you're not reaching that expectation. The expectation, even for this year, it wasn't exactly to win the ACC. It was to just be competitive toward the top of the ACC, and Miami couldn't even do that. Miami isn't even going to be finishing third in conference this year. Like, that's a problem there for Miami, and I understand that you're doing great things off the field, but Mario, like, come on, man, you got to lock in with this team. You've got to get this team in a position to where they are able to contend on a national level, and we haven't seen that from Miami since the Mark Brick days. And even then, they got exposed for what they were, around that time. So what else is it for Miami, besides just have a better on-field product? And that's really all that really needs to be said. I thought you said it perfectly there, Blake, about this game. But yeah, Louisville, Florida State locked in for the ACC champ game here in 2 weeks. That'll be an interesting game. We'll definitely talk about that when conference championship week comes around. But a game that also somewhat has conference championship implications, Arizona. Dude, they took care of business over Utah this weekend. I mean, they were out ahead. I think it was 21-0 about halfway through the first quarter of play, and they did not look back one bit in this ball game. Arizona just absolutely destroys Utah 42-18 this weekend, and they keep their Pac-12 title game hopes alive. All Arizona needs now, obviously they don't control their own destiny with 2 conference losses right now, but they need Oregon State to upset Oregon, and they would just need to win this weekend against Arizona State, and they have a Pac-12, an outside shot at a Pac-12 title game appearance and a rematch against Washington. That was a very competitive game early in the season, but good win for Arizona this weekend over Utah, and I think me and you both picked Arizona in this game, but we didn't think that Arizona was going to win this big, though.
Yeah, no, this is the team I've been taking my victory lap on these last several weeks. I haven't really. I've been a bit of a sore winner on this one, just because I've been really pleased with how I saw this team. I really like this team coming into this season, and man, Jed Fish talking about the job there, just incredible. Go through. You lose your starting quarterback, you lose a close game to Mississippi State in Starkville. So you're early off. I think you're 2-1. You're down your starting quarterback, and then Noah Fafita comes in. You play a couple of close games against Washington and against USC. Obviously, that USC game I have some opinions on. They should not have lost that game. That one they clutched defeat from the jaws of victory, I felt as if. But regardless of that, you're sitting here now, end of the season. You're 8-3. You have a chance to go 9-3 this year. Your preseason win total was, I think, 4.5. just incredible what they've done there, and they are getting better and better every week. This Utah team, I think, they hit their Super Bowl spot against Washington, and with that loss against the Huskies, there, I think that was them running out of gas. I think they really ran out of gas at halftime in that game. It kind of showed, they were up at the half. They didn't score in the second half. They stuck at 28 from midway through the second quarter until the end, or until the end of the second quarter, until the end of that game. So I think the gas tank started sputtering empty there, or started running empty there, right around halftime of Washington, and it carried over to this week because man, they got pummeled completely. Some question, or some, not questions, but some controversy among some people, I think, about the way this game ended. Jaden DeLora, who was that starting quarterback that went down early this season, comes into the game when this game's well out of reach, and he throws a 40-yard touchdown pass with 40 some odd seconds left in the game. Game's well out of reach already. It was 35-18 prior to that, so I'm not real concerned about it personally. Yeah, a little disrespectful, but college football is college football, and it will always be that. I think, I've seen some people bring up a couple of years ago, Utah went for a fake punt against Arizona when the game was well out of reach. So I think that was probably the payback for that more than anything. That was prior to Jedd Fisch's tenure, though. So, but still, players in that program were still there for that, so they remember that, and I'm sure that was talked about during the week. If that came to fruition, that may be taken care of. So I don't know. I'm not real concerned about that though. Ultimately, I'm just so impressed with what I've seen out of this Arizona team. They are just a good football team through and through. And here they are. They're sitting with a chance. If Oregon State can pull off the upset this weekend, they're headed to the actual title game, assuming they are able to take care of business as well. So. Um, just good for them, more than anything. Really impressive team there. And Utah, I missed on them this season. I thought they were going to be a little worse than they ended up being, but they figured things out. They put up a valiant effort without Cam Rising. But I think the gas tank just kind of finally caught up to him and ran empty. So, but still an impressive season for the Utes.
Yeah, I see your victory lap is on Arizona. My victory lap in the Pac-12 is nailing Utah. Actually, this year, funny enough, I had them 8-4, and barring a upset from Dion's boys, it looks like they're gonna finish 8-4 in the regular season. I think I had Utah 8-4 and about fourth or fifth in the Pac-12, and that sounds about right now. So that's the one I think I nailed perfectly this year. Was Utah. That's the one that in the Pac-12 that I feel really proud on. I hang my hat on. But yeah, Arizona. I've ever since that USC game, I started to buy into this team, and I've bought into the hype that you've been on this entire year, Blake, about this team. Is that they figured it out. And Arizona is a great story this year, great enough to where their ranking in my power ratings this week might be a little high, but it's a another great win for Arizona. I didn't think that this one was going to be as big as it was, but I mean, they got the job done. They got a job done in an emphatic fashion, and there's really not much more for this Arizona team to accomplish except maybe win a Pac-12 championship, maybe win a pretty solid bowl game this year, but a fantastic year for them, and a fantastic year for them in the final year of the Pac-12. They're going to transition over to the Big 12 next year, looking even kind of ahead of that. Big 12 next year is going to be a very interesting conference with the new additions and the absence of Texas and Oklahoma. It's a power vacuum that's wide open for a lot of teams next year, and I'm very interested to see where that goes. But again, hats off to Arizona. Another great win for them, but that's all you got to say about this team. Arizona's just been a fantastic team playing down the stretch of the season. And, like I said, there's not much more else to say, but there is a lot to say about Jordan Travis. Very gruesome injury. Florida State took on North Alabama this weekend. They ended up taking a victory. They were down 13-0, though, when this happened. Travis was doing everything that he normally does, scrambled out of the pocket, tries to slide down / he's tackled by a player, he's hip dropped, and his leg was not a good scene for a Seminole fan. And it's going to have a big impact moving forward. Obviously, Florida State, heading into rivalry week, they've got the Sunshine Showdown against Florida down in the Swamp this weekend, and then they got to go take on Louisville in the ACC champ game. So it's a situation for Florida State where they're going to have to adapt really quickly, and their college football playoff hopes are on the line with it. I mean, for Florida State to get in, a lot of what's been said is that they got to go undefeated at this point. We'll get to a little bit later. Some interesting developments happened with them with the college football playoff, specifically with the rankings, but I don't know. It's an interesting situation right now for Florida State. But Tyler, I'll ask you first. What are your thoughts on this situation with Jordan Travis?
So, talking about the injury, obviously a very gruesome injury. They have not really disclosed what it is. It's just lower body injury. But obviously, as soon as you seen, the situation, it was clear that he was not going to be playing again this season. But this is probably, for such a negative scenario, it's probably best case scenario because it does come against Northern Alabama. You were down 13-0 in the first quarter, but you win 58-13. You whip tail in the second half, and the second quarter they ended up taking the lead. But it gets Tate Rodemaker, the backup quarterback there, the ability to get in-game action heading into Florida, which is always great to have. And it's going to be interesting to see. Rodemaker was a 3-star from Valdosta. He has stuck it out at FSU since the COVID year, so he finally gets his chance to start and should be a good opportunity, put himself on the map.
Yeah, Rodemaker is going to be the guy that's going to step in here. Blake, I'll ask you now, how does this impact Florida State moving forward?
I mean, it does a lot. What you think about Florida State, though, is that they are a talented team throughout, but, you never want to lose your starting quarterback, especially late in the year like this. Travis has been a great player for them for the last 2 years, developed a lot last season. Everyone knew he was going to be a threat for that team this year. So it's not a good thing by any means to happen, and losing him takes away a pretty sizable part of your offense there with the ability for him to run, because Tate Rodemaker has mobility, but not nearly the mobility that Travis does. So you're kind of losing a little bit of that quarterback mobility facet there. You have talent up front though that can at least get you some yards on the ground in a more conventional sense. Trey Benson, obviously, the solid back there, gets a decent amount of carries. So you have hope there that you can still find a way to run the football with some decent success in that regard. But when you look at it, you mainly think that that Tate Rodemaker's going to have to rely on having just, 3 massive weapons to get the ball to, and just to kind of hope with that's going to work out that way. You can Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, great talents there out wide. And then, of course, also at the tight end spot there, you've got some talent with Jaheim Bell to just kind of throw it to as well. So there's talent there for Rodemaker to work with by all means. Losing your starting quarterback it's not a good thing to happen this late in the season. Your leader offensively, of course, not having your leader on the field might be even more detrimental in that sense. You wonder how much that can affect that team. We'll see this weekend, of course, with the FSU Florida game. We'll see how that plays out. But not a good situation for the Seminoles by any means. And you wonder. You hope that the playoff committee doesn't take that part solely into effect, but we'll see whether they do or not when the time comes to make a decision on selection Sunday. So.
Well, yeah, you bring up a good point with that. The most interesting point I think about when people have said that Florida State's not going to be ranked as high as, look at the first year of the college football playoff selection committee. Ohio State was playing with a third-string quarterback who only played one game, very similar situation to what Florida State is facing right now. And they hung 50, over half 100 on Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. And then they ended up winning a national championship that year. And the reason they really got into the playoff was because they hung half 100 over Wisconsin with their third-string quarterback. So, it's a very interesting debate that's currently developing right now in the college football landscape. But Speaking of really rankings and how things go, we're going to go with our power ratings this week once again, our top 25s. Blake is joining the show for the first time. He's got a first time for a recap, that is, so he will be sharing his top 25. So to recap how we do it here on the Orbit Football Podcast, we usually go by 5, start at 25 through 21, go up the ladder that way. But Tyler, I'll ask you first, what is your 25 through 21?
All right, so I have A&M at 25. They're back in my poll for the first time, I believe, in 2 weeks. SMU at 24. Iowa in my poll. Gotta love that defense. Definitely not the offense, but defensively they are unreal. Iowa State at 22, and the Volunteers of Tennessee at 21.
All right, Blake, what's your 25 through 21?
Yeah, so I'm coming in at 25. I've got the Miami Hurricanes. They keep fighting. They keep fighting every single time, so I'm not dropping them out yet. I've got Utah sitting at 24, another physical team there. Oklahoma State contending for a Big 12 title there at 23. We're going with the SMU Mustangs, the good old Pony Express team there at 22. And I've got the Louisville Cardinals going to the ACC title a couple weeks from now, sitting at 21 for me.
So I'm finally hopping on the train as well. SMU enters my top 25 at 25 this week. UCLA enters back in at 24. Iowa 23 bumps up just a tad. Tennessee falls down to 22, and at 21 I have Utah.
You have them at 21. I have them at 20. I have Utah. Notre Dame at 19. Clemson at 18. Kansas State at 17. And the Rebels of Ole Miss at 16.
Yeah, I'm going to go with I got the Vols here. A couple tough weeks for Tennessee. I've got them sitting at 20. I'm still riding with them. Oklahoma, another team that had a couple of tough weeks there. I dropped them down a little bit during that spell, so I've got them down at 19 now. We've got the Clemson Tigers. They've moved back up for me. I dropped them out for a while, but I've got them up to 18. A&M, the Ags there, a team that, I've had sticking at 17 for probably the last 3-4 weeks, and they stick there again this week for me. And then Notre Dame sitting at 16 in mine.
At 20, I have Notre Dame there. 19, I have Louisville. 18, Texas A&M. 17, Clemson. And 16, Ole Miss for me.
Boomer Sooner at 15 for me. Louisville at 14. Move them up a lot. Just they keep winning, and they keep looking good. So moving them up to 14. Arizona at 13. Penn State at 12. And the Beavers of Oregon State, and even in a loss, they move up one spot, get to 11.
I got Penn State sitting at 15 for me. Kansas State, the Wildcats, at 14. Oregon State, 13. Been high on that team all year. They've stuck around that mid-teen spot. They stay there this week with me. LSU, I've got sitting at 12. The defense just holding them back. And then FSU, after the Jordan Travis injury, I've moved them just outside the top 10 to number 11.
At 15, I have Oklahoma. At 14, I have Kansas State. 13, I have Oregon State. 12, I have Missouri. And 11, I have Penn State there.
Missouri is in my top 10 at 10. Florida State at 9. From what I've seen from Roadmaker, I don't want to move them down just quite yet. I guess, they did play an FCS competition, but he did his job just well. LSU at 8. The Huskies of Washington at 7. And Texas at 6.
Washington breaks back into my top 10 on the very edge at number 10. Ole Miss with that high-flying offense and Jackson Dart there at number 9. Arizona, the team that I have been all over all season, have snuck up to number 8 for me. Go Wildcats and Jeb Fish there. The Missouri Tigers also in my top 10 at number 7. Really like what Drink's got going there this year. And then number 6, the Texas Longhorns.
At 10, I have Florida State. At 9, I'm agreeing with Blake here. Arizona rises up. They're going to be at 9. At 8, I have LSU, agreeing with Tyler there. At 7, I have Washington, also agreeing with Tyler there. And at 6, I have Texas.
At 5, I have the Buckeyes of Ohio State. 4, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. 3, falling from 1 to 3, I have the Wolverines of Michigan. Oregon slides up 1, and so does Georgia. Those are my 2 and 1. The Georgia Bulldogs at the top of my poll once again.
Same 5 teams over here for me, but a little different order. I've got Michigan sitting at number 5 after a couple of questionable weeks and some strength from the others here. Alabama moves up to number 4, liking what I'm seeing from the Tide down the stretch here. Oregon keeps rolling. They're sitting at number 3 for me. Ohio State up to number 2. They've looked real strong. And then Georgia just looks unstoppable right now. They have cracked my number 1 spot once again.
At 5, I have Michigan this week. 4, Oregon. 3, Ohio State. And my 1-2 stay the same. 2 is Alabama. And number 1 is Georgia. That is our top 25s of the week, and now we gotta transition a little bit. We're recording this on Wednesday. This will be probably coming out sometime Wednesday afternoon, would be my guess. But college football playoff. The rankings came out once again Tuesday night. There were a couple changes that we saw overall. Nothing really too major throughout the bottom half of the top 25. Clemson does re-enter back into the poll. Actually, I think this might be the first time all year that they've been in the college football playoff top 25. NC State, they get in. Liberty is another group of 5 team that works their way in, undefeated at 11-0. Oregon State dropped 5 spots with their loss to Washington, but besides that, really nothing else major happens. Besides this one thing that happens in the top 4 right now, and that's Washington swaps with Florida State. Washington obviously went on the road. They beat Oregon State. Oregon State was ranked 11 by the college football playoff poll, and Washington right now has the number 1 strength of record in the country. And a lot of media, a lot of fans have felt like Washington's been slighted in the college football playoff poll comparatively to Florida State, and now even a debate against Michigan is starting to occur. Which, obviously isn't really going to matter because of what's going to happen this weekend with Michigan and their rival in Ohio State. The 2-3 teams will do battle, but, Washington moves up a tad bit to 4. Florida State falls down to 5. I think a majority of this is the similar reason of why Ohio State and Georgia ended up flip-flopping, because Georgia started beating ranked opponents, and the committee, thought that it was very impressive, and Washington, went on the road in a very, sloppy, ugly game, beat Oregon State. But, any other thoughts? I'll ask first Tyler. You got any other thoughts with the college football playoff poll?
So I think it actually is pretty easy to say that Washington is above Florida State, just based off of, the Jordan Travis injury, but I think this could have happened regardless, because you got to think they just went to Corvallis and beat Oregon State, and they finally didn't need 30 points to do it. They won 22-20 in what was an ugly football game. I unfortunately did not get to watch the second half live. Ended up going back to watch the extended cuts version, but did not get to watch this one live. Unfortunately, just very sick Saturday, so. That's how that kind of rolls. But, Washington, they did go on the road and they beat a very tough Oregon State team. And it might have just happened regardless, just because of Florida State playing Northern Alabama. But I think this looks all, somewhat right. I think most teams are in a spot to where it doesn't matter where they're ranked at now. They just need to win and they'll find their way in, or, put themselves in the best situation they can. Biggest thing I'm looking at is that, that 6 through 8 range, what's going to happen there, and Louisville too, because obviously Louisville can run the table and, win the ACC championship, and with some things happening, I think they could definitely find their way in. That Pitt loss looking very ugly right now, but looking through that 6 basically through 10 spot right there, because obviously we're going to have either 2 or 3 fall. 4 and 6 will figure itself out. But I will say, even with the Jordan Travis injury, I think an undefeated Florida State team, no way they miss the college football playoff.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, and my personal opinion of this is that I agree with Tyler here that they got to go undefeated. If they go undefeated, they're in it. No questions asked. They're only, if they lose, it's a really rocky road. Their best situation is probably to lose this weekend and then win the ACC title game, because then they'd be a Power 5 champion. But, they would need a lot of help to reach the college football playoff if that were to happen. And I mean a lot of help, because I don't know if a one-loss Florida State team, if Georgia loses or if Ohio State loses in close games over the next 2 weeks, I don't know if a one-loss Florida State, conference champion gets in over one of those teams. It's a very interesting debate that's happening right now. To me, I only think the top 8 teams have a shot. I really don't. I don't see a way that Louisville really has a shot to make it unless absolute chaos happens. And by chaos happening, chaos would need to start this weekend for that to be the case. And I'm talking, an Iron Bowl upset. I'm talking a Texas upset. I'm talking, an Oregon upset. There's a lot that has to happen for Louisville to get there, in my opinion. But, Blake, what are your thoughts on the college football playoff poll, excuse me?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So personally, I would have had Washington above Florida State for the past several weeks. I thought they should have been up there. I thought they had the better resume, to be quite frank. They haven't won games like Florida State has, but they have better wins than Florida State does in a couple of spots. So personally, I thought they already should have been up there. I knew it would eventually work itself out, so I wasn't too upset about it. But you know, like you guys were saying with Florida State, they have, if they win out, they're going to make the playoff. I really think they will. I don't think the committee will keep them out, even though it's still certainly on the table. But what the Travis injury does, I think, means that they don't have that room for error whatsoever. I don't think there is any chance that a one-loss Florida State team without Jordan Travis can make the playoff, regardless of when the loss comes. So they have to win out here. But I think if they do, that they're going to be in 100%. Washington, with that being up to 4, like I said, I think that's what it should be right now. I thought that's what it should have been a couple of weeks ago. Um, I don't think that there's a realistic challenge for them yet to Michigan, just because of the way Michigan has won pretty much all of their games from start to finish all year long, minus the Maryland game last week, which let down spot game. I can excuse that one. That happens every year for the Wolverines, pretty much coming into the Ohio State week, and usually it happens for the Buckeyes too, but they were able to avoid that this past weekend against Minnesota. But so I don't think there's much of a challenge realistically for them yet for that third spot. But of course, I think they'll be, barring disaster against Washington State, I think they'll probably be pretty well cemented into that number 3 spot going into next week and going towards the conference title games, assuming, like I said, no upset in Pullman. So I think it's all going to work itself out here still. There's still that threat around that 4 to or that 5 to 7, 8 range that could a deserving team be left out. Certainly, it's possible with the way things will shape out, but just knowing the way this sport works and knowing how everything can go down, I feel like we're going to get some sort of resolution here with rivalry week and conference championship week still on the horizon. I think it's going to it'll all work itself out, and we'll get the 4 clear cut teams to make it in by the end.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the hope. That would be the hope, that we don't have to sit here and have debates over the 4 deserving teams that should be in the college football playoff. But we have who we think are the better teams. That obviously hasn't really been the rating style, obviously, of how the college football playoff committee really ranks these teams. It's a big difference. Obviously, we have our thoughts of who. Right now, we've started to shape up on some opinions on some games, and let's start off a little bit of a preview of rivalry week right now. It's a big week this week. We have a loaded schedule of games that we're going to do. I believe I'll say this for those of you listening here today and watching. We have over 25 games that we're going to pick just for Saturday. Just for Saturday games, we have over 25 games that we're going to pick. And we have 10 games that we're going to pick Thursday, Friday. In this episode, we're going to do part 1 of our Week 13 Rivalry Week preview, and we are going to start with the games on Thursday and Friday, the weekday games. And obviously we had a couple games on Tuesday, a couple MAC games, but nothing of really too importance with that. But there's a game that's pretty heated rivalry, I will say, that's being played Thanksgiving evening. 7:30 ESPN. I know probably all 3 of us might be tuned into this one, but Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Egg Bowl. This game is entertaining. It seems more than not year after year. This is a very heated rivalry overall. Probably one of the more heated ones in college football, I would say. But Mississippi State, they're coming into this game. They're looking in a situation where their back's against the wall right now. Obviously, they fired head coach Zach Arnett. They moved on to him. They only have 1 conference win this year, and it was a 7-3 victory over Arkansas. And they got to win this game to be bowl eligible. So it's a tough spot for Mississippi State, while Ole Miss has just been Ole Miss this year. Very solid team overall. But yeah, Tyler, how are we feeling about the Egg Bowl this year?
Yeah, this game is it's always fun to watch. It always seems to be, even if it's not back and forth, it always seems to be close enough to where anything can happen at any moment. But this year, Mississippi State has just not been a team that has been in very close football games. They pulled out an overtime win against Arizona, and then it just absolute ceiling fan torture. They just stuck a hand right on the ceiling fan and it chopped it off. Essentially, they are horrible, and unfortunately, Coach Arnett relieved of his duties there. So, rolling with an interim, they win 41-20 against Southern Miss at home. If I don't think a lot of people are realizing this, but if Mississippi State does find a way to pull this game out, they will be bowl eligible. They're sitting at 5-6 right now. And Ole Miss, you can say, they're not playing for anything. Well, if they win, they make a New Year's Six bowl. So this game has a lot on the line outside of just rivalry. I think for Mississippi State, they're obviously, they're at home and they're 10-point underdogs still. So, we're not going to entertain the idea, for at least myself. I don't think Mississippi State will win the game, but if we're going to talk about how they're going to win the game, they're going to have to limit Ole Miss's offense. Ole Miss, one of the best offensive teams in the entire conference. Obviously, they had that extremely crazy game with LSU where, 49 points wasn't enough for LSU and a win. When we're talking about Mississippi State, this team does not score points. The last 3 conference games they played, 13, 3, and 10. 2 of them were on the road, but still just not a team that's going to score points. And they won a game 7-3. Just that's not going to happen often. But when we talk about this game, I think Mississippi State's going to have to find a way to run the ball somewhat well, because if they get put in third to longs or just any tough situations, I don't think this offense is going to help itself. I think Ole Miss is going to have pressure to get in, not easily, but it won't be hard, especially if Ole Miss starts to get in the backfield, in the first and second quarters. It's just going to get worse as the game goes on. So keys to victory, I think Mississippi State has to get out to an early lead. I think they need to put Ole Miss behind. I think they need to be able to run the ball well, and I think they're going to have to chew clock. I don't find many ways for them to win this game, and with that being said, I'm going to pick Ole Miss to win the game. I'm also going to pick them to cover. I'm going to go 37-9, and what's going to be probably a blowout. Obviously, I hope not, because this game has been fantastic the past few years, but I think the Rebels just have way too much heading into this one.
Yeah, you bring up good points there with that one. Blake, now I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on the Egg Bowl this year?
Yeah, I'm looking at this in a pretty similar way. This is my favorite rivalry game that gets played in college football, at least on the field it is. My favorite rivalry name, of course, goes to that Montana State Brawl of the Wild game, but on-field product, there's nothing I enjoy more than the Egg Bowl every year. Just 2 teams, 2 programs, 2 towns that just absolutely hate each other with a burning passion. What makes college football a beautiful thing. But like Tyler said, this is just not looking to be a great matchup early here. Mississippi State's been a pretty rough team all year long. They lack offensive ability. Their defense has had their ups and downs. It's just not a good team whatsoever, realistically. Obviously, yeah, they get their win against Southern Miss last week with the interim there after firing Arnett, but that still wasn't great to start off with in that game. They didn't look like they were, gonna blow that team out until it kind of started pulling away in the back half of that game. Will Rogers is back for Mississippi State, so you hope maybe that can give them a little bit of a boost. He was all right last week. Nothing spectacular by any means for him. This is going to be a game where if Mississippi State wins it, though, it's going to rely on, I think, you're going to have to see, number one, Ole Miss turn the ball over in some pretty bad spots and do it at least 3-4 times. It's going to have to just be a complete come apart by Jackson Dart and by Ole Miss's offense. realistically, I don't think that there's any way that Mississippi State can win this game without turnovers just going heavily in their favor. I think Ole Miss is too good. I mean, like you guys just heard, I have them in my top 10 power ratings right now. I would take them over most of the country, and that includes obviously Mississippi State. I just don't see much of a route for the Dogs to win this game unless it is just an absolute collapse by the Rebels. I think that if Ole Miss just keeps it clean and plays just safe football for the most part, I don't know if Lane Kiffin's got that in him, but if he does, I think this is going to be a runaway, and I think that's what's going to end up happening here. I've got Ole Miss winning this game pretty big here. I've got a 33-6.
So it seems like we all kind of have a similar thought about this game. I don't really have much else to add except for the fact that, I think that it's just been a really rough year, and by year I mean a calendar year for Mississippi State. Overall, for what's been happening with that program, it's a very tough situation that they find themselves in. And this year, obviously before some things happened, they might have been able to be, what they've been in the SEC the past couple of years under Mike Leach, where they're, 8-4, 7-5, not exactly contending for an SEC West title, but they spring a couple upsets here or there. They have a dominant offense, and they make some games interesting, including this one most years. But this year just kind of doesn't give me that vibe. I don't think it gives anybody really that vibe from Mississippi State. The offense it's a complete overhaul, complete change, and it has not worked. Will Rogers has been the gunslinger, and this year it's been more of a ground attack, more of a balanced attack for Mississippi State. And, Rogers has also been hurt a little bit for the year, so it's been a really tough situation for them. Ole Miss, on the other hand, they're just, they really avoided the collapse that happened last year, where last year, really their schedule and the way that things had turned out, they were really set up for a position after that Alabama game to just go on a late season collapse, and it was not a good late season for them. But this year, because of the schedule and because of the way that they played, their only two games that they've lost have been to Alabama and Georgia, the two teams that have won both sides of the SEC. So you can't really say much else from Ole Miss. They did what they needed to do this year. They've met expectations. They've had a good year, and I think, like what Blake said, they just kind of got to be safe in this game. Not even safe. They don't even have to play their best ball game. They just have to play well enough. And I think they will play well enough and more in this ball game over Mississippi State. Obviously, it's a rivalry, everything surrounding this game, but I just think Ole Miss is a better football team, period. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Rebels in this one, 31-10 over the Bulldogs in the Egg Bowl. It goes back to Ole Miss this year, the Egg Bowl trophy does, but that's the only Thursday game we've got. Now we're going to transition to Friday. Friday, to really kick things off, we have a pretty, I will say, not a bad schedule overall. There's some games that are a little bit more lackluster than others, but a game that it has importance, but not importance in the grand scheme of things. Iowa travels to Nebraska. The interesting thing about this game is that it is the lowest over-under ever, period, ever in the history of college football ever, period. The over-under right now is at 26.5. Which is
actually update. It is at 25.
Oh,
flat.
Okay, so it's even
no.
lower than what it was. Okay, so that's even better. And funny enough, Iowa has locked up a spot in the Big Ten championship game. They await the winner of Ohio State and Michigan into the game. But Nebraska's battling for a bowl. After October ended, they were 5-3, looked really good to be a bowl-eligible team, maybe contend in the Big Ten West, and now they are at 5-6. They need to win this weekend. They're favored by 2 in this game. Noon kick on CBS. This one's interesting, but Tyler, I'll get your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so we're sitting at 25 total points projected to be scored, which is, It is what it is. It's interesting, but I do think that this is going to be an interesting game because it's going to be like 32 degrees and it's supposed to be snowing. So what makes bad offenses even worse is horrible weather. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. None of us have the over. Don't worry about that. We do not have the over in this game because that is not what God wanted. But Nebraska, they are favorites in my eyes. I am going to look at how they can win this game because they offensively they have improved from where they started the year at, but still not the best. Chuba Purdy was the starting quarterback last week against Wisconsin. I believe they got out to an early 10-0 lead, and they kind of stumbled their way to a loss there, and they need to win this game for bowl eligibility. So I think if you are Nebraska, you're going to have to find some chunk plays against Iowa, who just has not let up kind of any sort of chunk plays. And for Iowa, you're going to need to find just a run game. Obviously, they're not going to put it through the air too much. Deacon Hill with probably one of the worst starting quarterback stat lines in the country: 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. 882 yards, and I believe he's started. I believe this will be his 7th or 8th game starting this year. So, just not great overall. Their leading receiver does not even have 300 yards, and wouldn't you know it, it's a tight end. So, I think if you're gonna win this game, Iowa, you just got to do what you've done all year, and that's basically force turnovers, just win the field position battle until teams just crumble under you. And I do think Iowa will be able to do that. I don't think this is going to be any different. I think this is another game where Iowa just gets the benefit of facing a Big Ten West offense that just also isn't very good enough, to win at the top level of a conference. So I'm going to go 17-6 Iowa, hitting the under by 1 point. But I think Iowa's not dominant, but I don't think Nebraska's really going to have the offense to kind of put themselves in the game.
Yeah, like you said, I think we all have the under, and all in a very fun way. So Blake, what is what is your thought on this football game?
Well, number one, I did not realize we had cracked 25 there, so that news is just great to hear. We're sending the Big Ten West out in style, is all I can say. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful way for the Big Ten West to go out, is with this game on Friday, the Heroes game here. Of course, we just got an update 15 minutes ago officially that Heinrich Haarberg will not be starting, that it will indeed be Chuba Purdy again, it sounds as if, but Haarberg will be an emergency option for Nebraska. So maybe something there, second half you can see it happen if need be, if that game or if that game is still close, but maybe Purdy's not looking at the elite level, or of course he hasn't looked all year, but at enough of a level to win that game. Of course, I don't think this game is ever going to really be out of hand. That's just the nature of Iowa football. They don't run away with games by any means. They haven't all year. They have yet to hit the they've yet to hit the over in games that have been sub 30 on the over-under line. So games keep staying close for the Hawkeyes there. Because you're never really out of reach if you're only scoring 20 points a game. Of course, they score, but locking that Big Ten West spot up to go to the Big Ten title game, good for the Hawkeyes. But realistically, you wonder about a letdown here with that being a thing, and with Nebraska needing a win to go to bowling. It's a dual spot where it feels like it plays into the hands of Nebraska a little bit, but just honestly and truly. With Haarberg not starting and with him clearly not being very healthy, I don't know that Nebraska is going to be able to have a chance at this game. I don't think the quarterback play behind Haarberg is really remotely good enough to be in this game, or to be competitive in this game with Iowa's defense. What you need is Deacon Hill and the Iowa offense to make mistakes. Now it's possible at Deacon Hill. Of course, Tyler said the stat line is one of the worst we've ever seen. The advanced metrics back it up. I forget who it was, but the QBR mixed with EPA for quarterbacks in the Power 5. Deacon Hill is the worst, and it is not remotely close. It's a pretty wide gap to the next guy there. and it's potentially the worst season we've ever seen from a Power Five quarterback in terms of the advanced metrics. He has been terrible for Iowa. It's you hate to say that about somebody, but it's just the truth. He has not been good by any means. So quarterback play for Iowa is not going to get this game out of reach. Certainly, the run game's been good enough to get them on the board when need be, get that one score game to get them the wins, but. Realistic, I think that's all it's going to take this time as well. Like Tyler said too, the snow probably going to be coming down here in this game, which is it's the way God intended for this game to be played in an absolute snowing slugfest. So, with everything I've said here, I don't think Nebraska's going to be able to pull it off in year one under Rhule. I don't think they're going to go bowling here, unfortunately for them. Bright future, I think. If things keep trending upward a little bit. But it's not going to be this week. I'm going to take the Iowa Hawkeyes to win this game, and it's going to be a beautiful score of just a perfect 9-0. Sending out the Big Ten West in style here, with the last game of this one being a West showdown.
Yeah, Blake, you bring up a lot of good points in this game. A lot of a lot of funny points, I will say. All three of us really have about this game. We really haven't picked an Iowa game this year. Is the funniest thing that. I'm thinking about this game because really the only game that I can remember that we picked that's been an Iowa game is was the Iowa-Wisconsin game, which we thought was going to be the de facto Big Ten West championship game. Which
we also covered the Iowa-Penn State game.
That is right. We did cover that game. I totally forgot we covered that game because I forgot that game happened because it was a 31-0 beat down by Penn State. But, Iowa is Iowa. They're the only reason why they are in, I think, Tyler and myself's, power ratings is because they have probably one of the top 10 defenses in the country. And that's really about it. And you got to put somebody there sometimes. And that's, I think, what we've both done with Iowa, sitting both at 23 spot for ours. But this game, this is going to set the game of football back by like 90 years. More so with the offense. Like this game it's like you said, snow. The way that God intended this game to go. It's a comical scene. It will be a comical scene, and Iowa just keeps pulling out these games. That's the funny thing that I think of is that they keep winning is the craziest thing that I say. Obviously, they lost the game to Minnesota, but they just keep rattling off wins left and right, and that's all they need to do, and that's the reason they're going to be representing the Big Ten West in the last year of the Big Ten West. And that's all they needed to do this year because everybody else is stepping over their own feet, including Nebraska. Like I said, Nebraska was 5-3, looked like they were in really good position to set up a Big Ten West title game here with Iowa this weekend. And then they fell off the face of the earth. And that's what every single really Big Ten West team has done this year. They look like they have a moment where they're about to seize the opportunity, and then they fall off the face of the earth, unless you're probably like Illinois, Purdue, or Northwestern, who just have kind of been playing about the same ball all year. It's, I don't know. There's not much else I really can add onto this game, other than the fact that I think I'm the only one with my score. I'm confirming a safety in this game with my score in this ball game. The way that it looks like, you may have thought, well, maybe it's just all field goals. No. Iowa is scoring a touchdown. It will be defensive, and they're also forcing a safety, and that is the reason why I have my score. And that score is 12-6. That's my final score for this ball game. I think Iowa gets the job done against Nebraska, but I think they win this game 12-6. In a game, like I said, we're all picking the under, and we all think that this game is setting back football for 50-plus years. But, it's Iowa, it's comical, and we talked about comical. We got to talk about this other team that we've kind of been fans of this entire year. I think we've watched about, 9 games of their season? About 9 games, if not more than that. But that's Boston College. We've mentioned them a couple times, a little bit here and there, sprinkled in the podcast. But we have low-key been Boston College fans this entire year, for the memes, for the laughs, for the love of it all. And this weekend they do have a rivalry game against Miami. Both of these teams, funny enough, are 6-5. Uh, and Miami just kind of hasn't been able to catch a break recently. Um, Obviously, early in the year, they lost the game to Georgia Tech on the most interesting game of football because Mario Cristobal forgot that, quarterbacks can take a knee in football games when they're ahead, when the other team doesn't really have timeouts. Miami, obviously, they beat Clemson. And then, it just kind of all really hasn't been going well from there for this Miami team in this situation. They lost, obviously a couple weeks ago to Florida State, and then they lost to Louisville last weekend. So, Miami is favored in this game. Boston College, they've struggled as well recently after being also 6-3. But this just kind of seems like one of these teams is going to bounce back. Do we think the talent, though, for Miami will be able to bail, and not really bail them out, but allow them to bounce back in this game, Tyler?
All right, so I am probably the biggest Boston College fan outside of the state of Massachusetts, and when I watch this team, I've watched the last, I believe, 8 games that Boston College has played, and I've watched the good and the bad. And the good comes from Thomas Castellanos, one of the probably more not very well known, players in college football. I think as the seasons went on, he's gotten a lot more traction, but 2,000-yard passer, almost a 1,000-yard rusher as well. He's been the offense for this team. Kai Rubishaw, second leading rusher behind Castellanos. The actual running back there's 150 yards off of him, and Lewis Bond, leading receiver, 565 yards. He's also pretty solid. I think that Lewis Bond is, I think he could have a big year next year. But this offense, it's kind of weird. It's either they play really well, you can always basically just add a turnover or two in the game for Boston College. They just do not take care of the ball really at all. It's just this team, they want to play close games, whether the better team or not. And the defense, the defense has been, I would say probably the stronger point of the team, just based off Jeff Hafley being the head coach there, former Ohio State defensive coordinator. But when I talk about Boston College, I guess it is for the jokes of it or whatnot. But I have actually enjoyed watching this team at some points. They do some pretty interesting things, with Castellanos, and he's a very fun player to watch. But when I go to Miami, this is a game they should win. Yes, it is on the road. It's on a Friday. It's ABC game as well at noon. But this is a game they should win. They have the better talent, regardless of how young or not they are. They're Miami. They should be beating Boston College, especially when Boston College was not a team that was supposed to be 6-5 at this point of the year. But yeah, Miami should win this game. They're 8.5 point favorites on the road for a reason. Boston College has gotten absolutely ran through the last 2 weeks, with that being Virginia Tech and Pitt. Just ran through. I think they're kind of just going to run out of gas here. However much gas in the tank Miami has left at this point, I think it'll be enough. And with that being said, I am going to pick them to win. No, I'm not. Taking Boston College. Come on. Could not go against Boston College here. They're my team. They're my second favorite team this year, definitely. 23-21. Going to pick a close game. I do think Miami has the better way to victory, but what we have in Massachusetts, in Boston, is belief.
Yeah, belief is a word to use there. Does Blake also have the belief though?
Well, sort of. I have belief against Miami. That's what I'll say. The problem here is that Boston College has been a decent team all year long. They've made their way to bowl eligibility. They've looked pretty bad the last few weeks. As Tyler was saying there, losses to Pitt, not great. They kind of got destroyed by Pitt, quite frankly, but not a good situation there. But The problem with Miami is what I said last week on the preview show was that I thought that it was the college special. You play your Super Bowl spot game, you lose that game. Usually that's where it kind of all you kind of run out at that point. They didn't though. They put up a fight against Louisville. I've already expressed my opinions, obviously, earlier about that game in our recap part. But another close loss and another Super Bowl style spot against a team that was playing to go to the ACC title game, I should say. They can't keep losing games like this and keep bouncing back the next week with no issue. They're a far superior team to Boston College. There's no real doubt in my mind about it. I don't think there's much doubt in anybody's mind about it. They are the far better team. They have far better talent. There's no reason that this game should not go in favor of the Hurricanes. The problem is that I just don't think they're going to be able to get themselves up off the mat again. You know, you've got three losses this season that have come in just absolutely heartbreaking fashion at the last second, or at least in the last few minutes at the very minimum there. And that just wears on a team, and especially on a college team like, with a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds on it, that just wears you down at some point. I give them kudos for getting themselves up off the mat every time. Of course, they sit at 6-5 now overall, so I give them kudos for that. But I just don't think they're going to be able to do it this time. Boston College needs a bounce back spot here headed in the bowl season after these last few couple of rough weeks. That they get this game at home, so maybe you have a little hope there. You hope that you have at least a handful of fans in attendance, more than there have been all season long. It's been kind of a barren place there in Boston, but maybe you get some people to come out and give yourself a decent home atmosphere going into this one for your seniors and for a game against Miami where you can storm the field after if you win it. And frankly, I think they're going to win it. Like I said, I just don't think Miami's getting themselves up off the mat again. They can't keep having this happen. Boston College, I think, is going to be determined to have a bounce back spot here, and to show that they didn't fluke their way into a bowl game, into a bowl spot. So I'm going to take Boston College here. I think that it's going to be not the greatest game we've ever seen by any means. I think it's going to look a little ugly because I think it's going to be an inferior team taking on a deflated team, which usually results in some rough football. But it'll be good nonetheless to watch. I'm going to take Boston College to win it. Still close, but 13-9.
So you're going with the really low scoring game in this one, Blake. I'm sorry, guys, but I would differ very heavily in this ball game. I understand that, yeah, obviously it's there for Miami because they've been able to bounce back a lot this year in games like this. They've had their back against the wall, they've been brought down to the mat, and they've, like you guys have said, they've got right back up and kept playing football this year. But I don't, I know it's a very tough spot, but Boston College is also in the same exact position that Miami is in. So therefore, I sit there and I look at the game and I say, okay, both these teams, outside factors are looking about the same. Yes, this game's at Boston College. Who is the better football team? And I mean talent-wise. And I understand Miami's out of gas. I understand that Boston College has been absolutely, ran over the past couple of weeks. But when I look at it, Miami's the more talented football team. Simple as that. I know this probably breaks both of your hearts, but Miami's the better team. Miami, to me, has somewhat more going for them in this football game. Even though both teams really don't have much going for them. And for that reason, I'm going to go Miami big, pretty big in this ball game. I got Miami winning this one 31-3. Absolutely steamrolling Boston College. I feel like Miami just kind of needs that 1 week, where they just like, all right, we've lost these games, we've been in these heartbreaking games. Let's just go out. We got one more week. Let's just go and give it all out there. And I think we're gonna get that. I got a 31-3 in this ball game. Miami is gonna, run over Boston College, and that's how I'm feeling about this game. But really, now we got to travel a little bit south, and jokingly before we recorded this game said that we were going to buy tickets for this game because they're so cheap right now, which is funny enough because this is a game with a lot of importance. When you look at the group of five standing moving forward this year, have not talked a lot about the group of five this year, but this one means a lot. UTSA travels to Tulane, 3:30 ABC game. Winner of this clinches a spot in the American title game. And likely will play SMU. All SMU has to do is beat Navy. We'll get to that in our next show, though. So that is a rivalry matchup this weekend, one that we didn't really know about, but did confirm that it is a rivalry. But UTSA travels to Tulane. Interesting game here. Tulane's ranked in the top 25. They've been a team that's kind of struggled a little bit this year. Doesn't seem like they're maybe as good as they were last year, but still in a position to win the American this year. So, I have to ask you first, Tyler, how do you see this game playing out?
So this is a game of offense versus defense. I think Tulane, the last 3 weeks, 13, 24, 24. Get it done, though. They have, that's all they've done this year is get it done. The only loss they have is to Ole Miss, by the way. They were very competitive in that game. It was at home as well, but they will be at home against UTSA here. I think Tulane, I don't want to say UTSA hasn't been there because they played some respectable opponents and they played some big games as well. But Tulane, last year they go beat USC in the bowl game at the end of the year. They put it together all the way last year too. I think this year, I think that Tulane sits in a better spot just based off of when you're these group of five teams, it's I think it's easy to get caught up in getting a lot of attention, but I don't think a lot of people have given Tulane a ton of attention this year. They're 10-1. They're at the back end of the the top 25 in the college football playoff poll, and I think they're a very, very balanced and solid football team. They've played some close games, but good teams win close games. That's very hard. You can say whatever you want about Washington. They've played an unreal schedule. They've won close games. They've won ugly. They've won pretty. It doesn't matter how it gets done at the end of the day, especially if you're a head coach. Fritz knows that. He's been here. He's been in big games. This is going to be the ABC game as well. For UTSA, they score a ton of points. 37, 34, and 49 in their last 3 games. And this is going to be an interesting test because, they lost to Houston in the first week of the year. Really low scoring game. I don't think teams were figured out yet. Lost to Army and, the Tennessee game on the road in Neyland. But ever since then, they have put up a ton of points. 34 is the least amount they've scored in conference play. And that was against Rice 2 weeks ago. So they put up points. And Tulane, they don't really give up points. So this is a stylistic matchup. And, when it comes to stylistic matchups, I'm going to go and take the home team here with the defense. I think they'll be able to get UTSA off the field. They'll be able to put UTSA in some positions they haven't been all year. And I do think it will be a close game. I think Tulane, though, being at home in such a big game, I think they're going to have a big offensive day. 30-20, give me the Waves.
So you're going with Tulane in this game. Blake, I'll turn it over to you now. What is your thought in this ball game?
Yeah, this is one. You got a couple of coaches here, Willie Fritz, Jeff Traylor, that are, you hear their name mentioned, and some bigger jobs around the country that are opening up. You've heard Traylor in his press conference last week at their senior day, asked about him interviewing for the A&M job, as there was a report about that, and he certainly didn't deny it. He did not deny that had happened. So you wonder about what does the locker room look like and what does the player mentality look like with coaches that, could potentially be out the door. I don't think Willie Fritz is for one there at Tulane. I don't believe he's going anywhere. I think that if anything, that this is going to be that will be a benefit for Tulane, because I think that locker room probably is aware that Willie Fritz will not be departing. More than likely, he's been pretty entrenched there. He made it pretty clear that he's entrenched there. And Traylor hasn't really hid the fact that he is, looking at other opportunities elsewhere. So, you wonder about that with UTSA. What does that do to that locker room, and to everybody there? I think Tulane's a better team outright here. To be fair, the defense has been great, as Tyler was saying. They've been a really good unit. They've not allowed many points all year long. the offense has kind of just been good enough all year. Um, a little surprising, I think. They lost some production certainly there with Spears headed to the NFL after last season, but and a couple other pieces as well. But Pratt, when he made it back, has looked solid. He's kind of been what you expected him to be. Not exceptional, but still solid, and an upper echelon quarterback in the G5 level. So I think this game pretty heavily favors Tulane. Just to be frank on it, with everything going on with Traylor at UTSA, whether he'll be there next year or not. With UTS or with Tulane just being the better team right now, I think they've hit their stride. That one loss, as Tyler said, to Ole Miss, in a game that they were really competitive until the last about the last drive in when they had a couple of turnovers. Of course, that game without Pratt as well. So I think a lot of people have looked back and said, what if they have Pratt in the game? I don't know personally that it matters if he's there or not, and ultimately they didn't have him, so it's a pointless conversation realistically. But I don't like where Tulane's at. I'm not huge on where UTSA is at. Really, they do just kind of good enough the last few weeks. They've dropped a couple of games that you wonder about whether they really should have dropped those games, or whether they should have been even close in a couple of games here. They played North Texas and ECU fairly close in the last few weeks. Of course, they destroyed South Florida last week, their senior day. So we'll see where things go. But right now, realistically, I just think this is all Tulane in my eyes. I don't think that they're going to have much issue in this one. I think it's still going to be, a fairly competitive game. I think the score's going to be close because I think these teams are still at least close, even though in terms of talent levels, even though I do think Tulane has the edge. But I'm going to go Tulane to win this game 27-23 at home here and set themselves up one game away, conference title away from going back to another New Year's Six game.
Yeah. I mean, Tulane, obviously, Tyler said it, good teams win those close games, and you got to start respecting a team like that. But I don't, a little spoiler here, I don't know if it's sustainable for Tulane, especially moving into their next two games, because obviously if they beat UTSA, I believe they either get a rematch with UTSA or SMU, and SMU is a team that's been a crazy offense this year. It's going to be tough for Tulane to sustain that, 12-1 record with your only loss being to Ole Miss this year. That's tough for a team like that, Tulane, because they're a team that, it's not like they have the talents of the Georgias or the Ohio States or all those teams. But Blake also brings up, you guys both bring up good points when it comes to Jeff Traylor and him really kind of looking elsewhere with jobs right now. He's been tossed around with the A&M job. He's been tossed around with a couple, not exactly some other jobs with his name there, but he's likely going to, interview for some positions this year, I will say. And he's rightfully deserved it for what he's been able to do with UTSA, as they're, now a team that is, they've gone from the conference. They went from the Conference USA to the American, and they're immediately in their first year in the American contending for an American title. That's impressive. And the Roadrunners have been one of the better group of 5 programs here over the recent years, probably since about 2019. And I think that they just seem to be in a position where they're going to get Tulane, because Tulane's got to get got at some point. And I think this is the position where they're going to get got. And with that being said, I'm going to go with UTSA in this ball game. I got a 28-26, super close ball game. I think it's going to be uber competitive. But give me the Roadrunners in this ball game. But now to back to our rivalry situation that we're going to go back to. We've got one this weekend, Missouri and Arkansas. The name of the rivalry is escaping my head right now. But Missouri obviously struggled a little bit last week against Florida, got the victory thanks to some heroics from, their kicker once again. And Arkansas has just been down in the dumps this year. Two programs in very different trajectories right now. But Tyler, how are we thinking about this rivalry matchup this weekend?
So the name is the Battle Line rivalry, to remind you there. But so this game it's weird. Sam Pittman sounds like he's going to be back. Official statement said that they're sticking with him. So this is going to be, they're not fighting for a bowl game here. They're 4-7 already. This is a big game though, because this is kind of a game where if you do win this game, we're not going to forget how this year went. But it definitely heals a lot considering when, they went on a 6-game run, 7-game run, really, BYU, LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, Bama, Mississippi State, Florida. Every game except for the A&M game was one possession. And a majority of those are on the road. They did beat Florida. They lose really close games in a tough slate. They go on the road. They beat Florida in overtime. They finally get it. They make a change at offensive coordinator. Kenny Guyton, former Ohio State quarterback, calling plays in that game. And then, they get Auburn at home the next week, and they just get absolutely piss stomped, 48-10 at home. And, we just seen what Auburn looks like this past weekend. We didn't even get to talk about that. But Auburn, we talk about Arkansas getting piss stomped. Auburn really got piss stomped bad by New Mexico State on their home field. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of Arkansas we get here. Are we going to get those close game teams that they were playing early in the year? Maybe some pressure relieved off everyone. Pittman's going to be back next year. Maybe some pressure relieved. Or are we going to get, that Auburn game, Arkansas, where even though they're at home, they get utterly shellacked the entire game. For Mizzou, they win. They're in a New Year's Six. Big year for them. Obviously, they do lose to Georgia and LSU, but in the preseason, we weren't picking them to win those games, and they played very, very competitive in both of those. I think the Georgia game was a little bit more desirable because they didn't get 49 put on their head, but LSU's offense, we've seen what it looks like. So I think it's a fantastic season for Missouri, and I think for Coach Drinkowitz and them, I think they're going to want this game bad. I think they're going to play very well. I think they're going to play up. They're not going to play. They're not playing a 4-7 team here. They're playing. This is a big game for them. And with that being said, 34-13, I think Missouri takes it. I think it will be a little bit more dominant than that, but I do think Arkansas, I think they'll be able to keep Missouri off the scoreboard just maybe a little bit, but I don't think this game's going to be close.
Yeah. So you're going that one with this game. Blake, what is your thought on this game?
Yeah. So to start with, obviously, we hear that Sam Pittman will be back next year. Yurachek announced that the other day. I think that I think it needs to be said that although yes, a statement was made by Yurachek, the athletic director there, that was going to be the case. I'm not going to take that to heart yet. I need to see what happens in this game because if they come out lifeless here and look like that team has quit on Pittman, I think a change is going to be made. And I don't think it's going to be a lone change of Pittman. I think that probably Yurachek will be out of a job as well. I think that's quite frankly part of the reason he'll be back next year is because Yurachek knows he will. I don't think he'll be the guy to make the next hire. I mean, this is the man that hired Chad Morris in Arkansas once upon a time to kill that football program, and then hired Sam Pittman to try to fix it. So I don't think that Yurachek will be the guy to make the next hire Arkansas, and I think he knows that if he made a move here, he would have been out the door as well. To be frank, and I don't think that it's out of the question that that's going to be the case yet. So we'll see how that goes. Um, Obviously, we've seen some issues out of Arkansas recently. That the Auburn game, at least they watched some good halftime media. We all saw the picture of Arkansas watching the Polar Express there at halftime. Maybe the best Christmas movie there is. So good for them on that one. But not what you want to see out of a team that's getting ran by Auburn at the time. So it's not a good situation there in Arkansas. And I honestly, I really do wonder with Pittman being brought back, I like Sam Pittman. He's a guy that I want to see succeed at Arkansas. Arkansas, a program that you would like to see, be better than they are right now, and you want to see Pittman be the guy to bring them, back to relevance. But with the way things have gone this year, I really wonder that if the news of Pittman being officially retained for next year, as of now at least, if that doesn't, have the opposite effect on the team that you would hope it would, where you would hope that they would play up to it. You wonder if they just play down again. It's on the table there. I would like to hope not, but I really wonder what that locker room feels like right now, with how everything has gone and how that news is going through it. And Mizzou's just a really good football team as well. I like that Mizzou team coming into this season. I stuck with them all year long, and they have been great. So Cody Schrader has played has had a legacy month of November here. He will go down in Mizzou folklore, I would say, probably for the last 3 games that he's had. He is kind of, I think, probably in those last three games, cemented himself as being what I would assume probably a first team All American at the running back position, and at a very minimum the first team All SEC running back this year. So good for him on that. He has just looked unstoppable. Brady Cook, cleaned up a little bit last week the last few weeks here against Tennessee and against Florida. Florida came out, played that Mizzou team close, but you knew it was going to happen just because of the situation Florida was in. And Mizzou still pulled it out at the end. They came out on top. Got the win there, and I just think they're going to run through this Arkansas team, regardless of whether Arkansas is up for this game or not. I don't think it's going to matter, just because I think Mizzou is the far superior team. So I'm going to go Mizzou to win this one pretty sizably, 36-10, and really I'm just interested to see in this one whether Arkansas shows life or not. That's kind of my big thing at this point, is whether that team shows life or not, and whether the announcement we heard comes to fruition.
Yeah. I think a lot of interesting is surrounding this game. A lot of things are surrounding this game, I will say. Because like Tyler said, Missouri wins. They're in a New Year's Six Bowl. They're the highest ranked 2-loss team in the country. They've played, very, very well this year, I will say, has Missouri. And I mean, they kind of took me. I knew this team was going to be competitive in the SEC East. I just didn't think that they were going to be the second best team in the SEC East this year. They've taken the reins of that and rode with it. And when your only 2 losses are to LSU, who has one of the the best offense in the country, and the other one is to Georgia, the best team in the country, that's nothing to scoff at. When your expectations were probably to go about 8-4, 7-5 this year. And you're looking at Arkansas right now to go 10-2. Missouri, I think that they're better. Simple as that in this game. There's not much really else I have to say in this game. Then they're playing like a really good football team right now. And Arkansas really has been on the opposite end of that. They've just been in a downward spiral for a majority of this year. It's been inconsistent as well too, because they've had games where they've been really competitive against certain teams like Alabama, which was out of the blue, and their early games, as we said, they were close with BYU, they were close with LSU. They were, A&M was a competitive game for a majority of it. Ole Miss was a competitive game. It just, none of them bounced their way, and I don't know if they're going to have one that does bounce their way this year. And with that being said, I'm going to go with Missouri in this game. I got a little bit closer. I still got Missouri covering this ball game, but I got a 30-21. I'm going with the Tigers in this one and setting themselves up in a really prime position moving into the postseason. But back to a Group of 5 game that has a lot of interest this weekend. Air Force travels to Boise State. Now, Air Force had a lot of hype around them when they were undefeated. They've since lost 3 straight games. They're sitting at 8-3 right now. And they're looking in a situation where they got to. This game is practically a win and get in game for the Mountain West title game against UNLV. Boise State this year, not exactly the season that they wanted. 6-5 right now coming into this game. Of their 5 losses, 4 of them are all one-score losses, and I believe 3 of those are 3-point or less losses. So it's been a little bit of a tough season for Boise State, but they take on Air Force this weekend. Interesting spot. Tyler, what are your thoughts on this game?
So Boise got rid of Avalos head coach last week, I believe, and Spencer Danielson came in. I believe he was the defensive coordinator. He is the current interim. And last week, they nearly hung half 100. They did it the week before, but Utah State was the very unlucky opponent for Boise, which, it's weird, but, even last year, Boise made an offensive coordinator change, and it worked very, very well. And it looks like, head coaching change right now is going to be very, very well, too, because they looked good on the road. They have, they're not a prototypical home away team. They play better at home though. They've took care of business. They've lost close games, like you said. Just kind of rough. Probably one of the better 6-5 teams, just based off of, I guess, resume. But Air Force, they started off really hot, 8-0, got ranked, and just the hard times. Army, they just got completely stonewalled. Hawaii lost that game as well, and they went toe to toe with UNLV at home, but ended up falling. And UNLV has been one of the stories of in the entire country, not just that conference, just the entire country. What Barry Odom has been able to do at UNLV, but this is going to be an interesting game because, like you said, the winner of this game likely goes to play UNLV in the conference championship game, both sitting at 5-2. San Jose State sitting at 5-2 as well. So we'll have to see what they do. They play UNLV, so that should take care of itself. But yeah, going to be an interesting thing to watch out for because San Jose State's 5-2 and UNLV's 6-1. So I don't really know how all that tiebreaker stuff would fall out. But if we have a 6-2 UNLV, a 6-2 San Jose State, and whoever 6-2 after this game. So not sure how that's going to work out, but yeah, should be an interesting game. Getting played on the beautiful blue turf there in Boise. With this game, though, I think that Air Force, Boise's run defense has been good, not great, and I think Air Force. They have stumbled here, and I think Boise is coming off a high point. And like I said, Boise is doing well at home, but I do think that coming off of a high point like they just did against Utah State, I think the talent differential between Utah State and Air Force is going to be a big hit. And I think Air Force just played probably the best team in the conference at home. They're going to have to go on the road, but I do think this is a good spot for Air Force to win this game. Going to go with a competitive 24-19 game. Think it will be close, but I do think Air Force, they get the upset on the road.
So you're going with the close game there in this one. You're going with Air Force. Blake, I'll turn it over to you. What are we thinking about this game in the Mountain West?
Yeah, where I'm at on this game, we've seen Air Force stumble pretty hard here the last few weeks. They've dropped 3 straight now. I honestly think they may have just run out of gas at this point. I think it was a fun team to see. It's a good team. You like to see the Cervers Academies have good seasons like this. But I just think they've run out of gas. The Hawaii loss in there and the Army loss with Army having some issues at the quarterback position. Not really what you want to see from Air Force there. And you're playing a Boise team that is, clicking on what feels to be all cylinders once again at this point, with potential to head to a Mountain West title game, I should say. Obviously, again, as you guys said, the rules out there for tiebreakers are odd to say the least. It's hard to say who gets the spots there. I'm not completely sure yet. But I believe Boise controls their own destiny in this game, if I understand it correctly. So we'll see how that goes. Spencer Danielson out there, as Tyler, as you mentioned, the interim guy there. Right now, I would say he is my favorite to get that permanent job. He's been there for a while, stayed there through the Harsin changeover to Avalos. He's a Boise kind of guy. I think that realistically speaking, I think he's probably going to get this job. Seems like the players like playing for him. Seems like he's kind of entrenched there. So, this is still kind of that also, that trial run that I would say he probably wants this job. So he's going to give everything he's got to get this team up and ready to go to this to win this game and to sneak their way into a conference title berth. Um, and with that, honestly, I'm not going to waste too much time on it here. I'm just going to kind of tell you, like I said, Air Force I think is out of gas. Realistically, I don't think they've got enough left in the tank to hang with this peaking Boise team, with a team that's really playing hard for Danielson right now. So I'm gonna go with Boise to win this one. I think it's still gonna be kind of close, still gonna be low scoring, but I'm gonna take it 20-10 for the Broncos.
So you're saying close game as well in this one, low scoring with that score. Um, I have a similar thought about this game, because I just think that Air Force hit their peak. Um, Air Force was 8-0. Then they faced Army and have not been able to really roll since. And even looking at how they got to 8-0, it seemed like every week Air Force was winning a game, and they were winning a game by like a field goal or a touchdown or something. And obviously good teams roll like that, but to a point, it's got to reach an end, and it seemed like it kind of reached that peak for Air Force. And since then, they dropped 3 straight. They're in a hole right now, and then they got to go on the road to the Blue Turf to take on a Boise State team that's been playing pretty well recently. So what it looks like for Air Force right now is it's different trending teams. Boise State trending up, Air Force trending down, as Blake says. And I think that Boise State is also a better team than Air Force is. I'd never really kind of bought into that hype that Air Force was getting, because it's a service academy team. But which is obviously respect the troops and all that. But what those offenses are going to be. What those teams are going to be. They're running the triple option. They're mostly single faceted teams. When you look at it overall, and you look at the Air Force team, it gets you far, but it gets you to a point. And when you look at it for this game, I just think that Air Force is in a really tough position. I think Boise State is looking at a good position, and for that reason, I'm going to go with Boise State in this game. I got a 31-27 competitive game, close game, but I'm going with the Broncos in this one. And now we will look at another rivalry matchup, probably the last time we might see this rivalry matchup for a minute. Texas and Texas Tech taking on each other. 7:30 game, Friday, ABC. And Texas, they still, in a sense, they control their own destiny in the Big 12. I don't know about the college football playoff. You like to think that they probably do, but it's an interesting spot here for Texas. They played past couple 3 games. They've got wins, couple road wins, couple close wins, but Texas Tech really hasn't been the team that we kind of thought they were going to be this year. But Tyler, I'll get your thoughts on this game first.
So, Texas, the last 3 weeks, the Kansas State game, the TCU games were close, but they were up in those games by a majority, by a lot too. They blew those games against Iowa State. They didn't blow the game. It was a close game. They were just the better team, kind of how I expected it. I was only 2 combined points off, 1 for each. But this Texas Tech game is weird because spoiler alert, I have Texas big, but I think this could be not a sitting duck spot, but I think Texas Tech, they've played close games in the last 3 weeks, and they've won as well. 2 have been at home. They went on the road and beat Kansas. They're going to have to go, to Texas, which is not going to be easy, but I think Tech is going to play up here. They played up against Oregon, and we know how good Oregon is now. Obviously, that was at the start of the year. But I think this is going to be – I think Tech is going to play up, but I think this is going to be a week where Sark knows, guys, we have to get to the Big 12 title game. Let's make a statement right here, and then let's go, try to fight their way into the playoffs. And with that being said, I'm not going to dive deep into this game because, to be honest, I don't have that much of a read on this. I think that Texas is just gonna. I think Texas is gonna find a way to not open the passing game up because they've been able to pass the ball well. But I think this is going to be a big passing day for Quinn Ewers and co there. And 31-14 is what I have it. I think it'll be a big statement game for Texas, and I think that they're going to try to fight their way in the playoff.
Yeah, Texas has a lot to play for right now. Obviously, this is the closest that they've been to making the college football playoff in its 4-team iteration. But, Blake, I'll turn it over to you. What are you feeling about this game?
I feel kind of similar spot about that. I like this Texas Tech team a lot. I did all year long. I've been kind of disappointed by them. They've been one of the teams that have let me down a little bit. They've just kind of, especially early in the season, they lacked a little bit of an identity. They figured it out a little bit here in the back half. They pulled that upset on Kansas. They've put up a valiant season, but not the one I was hoping to see from them. I think I actually had them as my third or fourth place finishing team in the conference, and that is not going to come to fruition here, unfortunately. But Texas just looks a little bit better. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. They played Iowa State last week. We talked about that earlier. They played really well there. Really impressed with what I saw from Texas. I thought that was just going to be, such a weird spot for them that with their inability to pull away from teams, and they finally kind of figured out a little bit last week how to do so. And I think that certainly they're going to have some success doing that against Texas Tech as well. If they're able to do it against Iowa State, I think they'll do it against Texas Tech. Iowa State's just a better team than Tech is right now, I think. So as much as I would like to say this is a letdown spot, and as much as I would like to ride with the Red Raiders here, I don't think I can. Texas is just better. They're too good at this point, I think, and I don't think they're going to be in threat to lose this game with knowing what's on the line here, and with some veterans on that team that know what's at stake. So I'm going to take Texas to win this game. I think they're going to handle it pretty well. I think I'm going to take a 37-14 with the Longhorns just kind of rolling through the Red Raiders.
Yeah, I think we all kind of have a similar thought on this game where it's just that Texas is playing. They're getting the job done. They're doing what they need to do. And they're focused on something really big right now for them in that program with Sark and company. I kind of agree with everything that's been said. I just think that Texas has a lot to play for right now. And usually in the past, this is where Texas has fumbled, and this is where Texas has fallen. They haven't really done that this year. They haven't lost that second game. They haven't, had that upset. They've won those games. Have they done them with, heart attacks occurring? Yeah, but they've won them. That's all that matters. And they're still a very good football team this year. And because of that reason, I'm going to go with Texas in this one pretty big. I got a 45-17. I just think the Longhorns are in a good position right now. I think they're playing really good ball right now. But to an interesting game on the slate, we're gonna travel up north. This is a rivalry matchup for the Land-Grant Trophy, and we've got Penn State and Michigan State. This game is in Detroit. It's a 7:30 kick on NBC. It's at Ford Field. Interesting that they're playing this game here, but Penn State's big favorites. Michigan State, it's been very well documented what the issues with that program have been this year. But, what are we thinking about this game, Tyler?
Yeah, you say interesting. Yeah, that's a way to describe it. Michigan State, they did pick up their second conference win last week, so we'll give them props there. They went on the road to Indiana, got the win by 3 after getting basically steamrolled by Ohio State. So good way to rebound. I think Harlan Barnett has he's kind of pulled that program back around. Just just not a great situation there. And honestly, sitting here at 4-7, I in the preseason I had him at 3-9, and that was with Mel Tucker. So to be able to salvage any bit of a season here, I think is a job well done by Mr. Barnett and that staff that has been put together there. But I don't think it's going to be a good game here. Drew Allard, we'll have to see if he's back or not. I believe that he's supposed to be. So we'll have to see, but I don't know if that's going to matter because I think they can do it without him. Penn State, I just think that this team is this might not even be that high scoring, just the way Penn State's probably going to want to play, and I think Michigan State, what we've seen is a lot of these bigger upsets in the conference play. A lot of teams they'll just run the ball to kind of just kill clock. That's kind of how it's been. I don't think the passing game is going to be there. I think the secondary is too good, and we know about Penn State's rushing defense. Obviously, the Michigan game, Michigan ran for a lot, but they didn't really give up that many yards per carry, and a lot of big runs on 3rd and long that they just really weren't. They were not going to face up against that. They did just more of coaching errors on that part. But how Michigan State can win this game? Explosive plays. Explosive plays will win this game for Michigan State. I don't think this is a Michigan State team that is just going to be able to dink and dunk all the way down the field on Penn State. Just don't think it'll happen. It'll have to be big-time plays, and I think they're going to have to get some turnovers. Like you said, it is in Detroit. It's in Michigan. So if you can take away anything, there might be fans more on the side of Michigan State, but who really knows with a game like that. So, I don't think this game is going to go Michigan State's way. I have it 37-3 Penn State. Just don't think it's going to be competitive, but to be honest, Michigan State's had some ugly losses, but 4-8 with an interim head coach and where that program's at, pretty honorable season.
Yeah, definitely there for Michigan State. Blake, I'll turn it over to you. Also, I will say, Tyler, Drew Aller will be back for this game, by the way, on Friday. But Blake, I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I'm going to echo some of the sentiments here from Tyler. I'm impressed with what Harlan Barnett's been able to do with that team, with everything kind of coming apart early season there. I, as well, had them. I think I had them finishing last in the Big Ten East in the preseason, and that was before all of this kind of chaos went down. So good on them to bounce back after a kind of a tough early season swing there with all of the news coming out. They're just not a good team realistically, but they picked up a couple of wins there, so good for them. Obviously, they got the win last week against Indiana to secure not last place in the Big Ten East. That will officially go to the Hoosiers there. Of course, questions around that program right now, but so good on Michigan State for doing that. Truthfully, I'm not going to entertain the potential of an upset here. I don't think there's any chance it's going to happen. So I'm just going to give props to Michigan State where it's due on what they've done this season. Good on them for having that bounce back. But they're going to get rolled here by Penn State pretty handily. I don't think there's much of a question about it. I'm going to take it 45-9. I think Penn State's going to handle it. So I'm not even going to entertain the upset opportunity.
So you're going also with Penn State pretty big in this game. I think all three of us kind of agree with this one. Penn State big. I got it 30-3, excuse me. Penn State, I'm rolling with them in this one. I don't really have much else to say because all of it's been said. Props to Michigan State for not being as bad as it could have been this year. And Penn State, they obviously have, what the program is. It's another 10-2 season. It's another good season. You're probably, once again around a top 10 team in the country. You can't win those big games, but you do what you do everywhere else, and I think they're going to do that this weekend. So Penn State 30-3 is my pick for that one. And now we got to go to this game. This game is going to be very, very, very interesting in the scheme of the Pac-12 and the scheme of the college football playoff. We got the Civil War this weekend, the battle for the Platypus Trophy. It's a great rivalry matchup here between Oregon and Oregon State out west. Oregon State's won the past two matchups, and Oregon this year looks like they're one of the better teams in college football. That's, probably putting it lightly there, but Oregon State had a situation where they, dogfight, a sloppy game with Washington, and now they got to go on the road and play Oregon. A matchup that probably doesn't favor them as much, and that the line says that as well with 13.5 in favor of the Ducks. But Tyler, I'll ask you first. What are we thinking here out west in Oregon? Who's going to be the team that comes out on top and wins that state rivalry again?
So this is a very big game, as you guys hit on the recap part of the show. Arizona, they take care of business, and Oregon falls this week. It'll be Arizona playing Washington in a very close game in the first part of the season. 7-point game. At that time, we were like, Washington, they only beat Arizona by 7. A lot of people were like that. I know Blake had it close. I figured it was going to be around 14, but it'll be Arizona versus Washington, and Oregon can't get it done, and and Arizona takes care of Arizona State in what should be a fun rivalry game as well. But for this game, this is going to be very, very interesting because we just seen Oregon State play in pouring rain, 35, 40 degrees, not ideal for either team. But they take a close loss, and I did not get to watch the second half, so I'm not really sure exactly what transpired. But I got exactly what I expected from Oregon State, and I know that Oregon staff, they know exactly what they're going to get. They're going to get a very power run heavy team, play action. They're going to make DJ's life very easy, but DJ is still going to have to make those plays when he is asked upon to do so. And I think that this is a horrific matchup for the Beavers and Oregon State. I just think Oregon, they're going to be able to stop that run game. And it's not that I don't think that DJ can throw, but I don't know if Oregon State is going to be able to get open against this Oregon defense that has been very, very good all year. The hiccups against Washington, you can say hiccup whatever you want. That game, if Oregon takes care of business, we'll be seeing that game happen again. USC, USC's offense is not the issue with that program. So, I'm not shocked that Oregon let up points there, but Oregon State, I just don't think is a team that's going to be able to put up points like that. I don't think they're going to be able to throw the ball on Oregon very well. So Oregon State, it's going to have to come down to this run game. Oregon State is, averaging, 3 yards per carry. I don't know if that's going to be enough. I think they're going to have to get some chunk plays as well. Oregon State, obviously, very big in the chunk play department through the ground. Gonna be an interesting matchup here. But like I said, I don't think it's a good matchup at all. I could be completely wrong. And Oregon State could run for 5-6 yards per carry, and they could just steamroll this Ducks front line. But I don't see that happening. And I think Oregon's offense, we've gotten exactly what we've gotten from Oregon all year. A lot of yak, big play opportunities after the catch, yards after contact, good zone run game. We've gotten exactly what we've gotten, or what we thought we were going to get from Oregon all year, and they really haven't, shuddered at any point. So, with that being said, I think Oregon goes one step closer to getting to the, putting themselves in playoff contention. I think they do get to Las Vegas, and I think they're going to win this game 26-17. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive, but I do think Oregon late is going to be able to separate.
So you're going with a closer game in this one. Blake, what are your thoughts on this matchup this weekend?
Yeah, Oregon State coming off that tough loss to Washington that we talked about earlier. This feels like, as I talked about last week with the Miami Louisville game, and of course I talked about earlier with the Miami Boston College game. It feels like kind of one of those college kid specials, those college specials, where you come off a Super Bowl game, especially one that you don't win. It's just really hard to get back up. We saw Miami do it last week. I don't think Miami's gonna do it this week, and I don't think Oregon State's gonna do it this week either, frankly. It's plus the mixture of, as Tyler said, this is a bad matchup for Oregon State. What they want to do, they want to run the football well. They want to run that play action pass game, get downfield with it. Oregon's not going to allow you to do that defensively. They haven't all year. They're not going to start doing it this weekend, especially as they continue to look just better and better week by week. They are continuing to improve and, cement themselves as a true contender for the national title right now. It's just not a good spot for the Beavers here, truth be told. I'd like to see them put up a good fight here, and I think they're going to try. They're going to still show the effort, but It's just I don't think they're going to have enough left in the tank after taking that loss last week. I just don't think they've got it in them, especially with how good Oregon's been. I think they're going to at least hold Oregon's offense down a little bit to what we've seen them do the past several weeks. We've seen Oregon just score points nonstop for about a month now. I don't think they're going to be able to do that on this Oregon State defense quite as much. But I wouldn't be shocked if they still put up a put up a decent amount here. I've got it staying a little close and a little lower scoring. Um, I got it 28-14 for the Ducks. Just not a good spot for Oregon State here, and I think Oregon's going to take themselves to the Pac-12 title game with everything still to play for, and a spot at the spot in the playoffs still on the line with that rematch against Washington looming.
Yeah, yeah. Oregon in this game, I will say, they're in our really all of our top rankings for a reason right now. They're all in our top 5 to say, and they're all really inside our top 4, even further at that. Oregon's playing really good football this year. Oregon is a very good team, but there's one thing that still kind of concerns me about this team, and it kind of flashed a little bit in the Washington game, and that's a little bit of Oregon's run defense. Washington's a team that has not been able to run the football all year really that well, besides the Oregon game where they ran very well in that ball game. Washington, I think Johnson, the tailback, ran for over 100 yards against Oregon's defense in that game. That was a really big turning point in that game because Washington could not run the football before that game, like really well before that game. That's an issue for Oregon. And that's Oregon State's bread and butter, is running the football. Washington last week, they had to throw against Washington, and the conditions didn't really benefit Oregon State. And obviously, that game, sloppy game, messy game, whatever you want to say about it, Washington got the job done. I thought they looked like the better team throughout, just period, really even closer than what the score said. But Oregon State, this weekend it's a rivalry matchup, obviously. But as Blake said, it's the Super Bowl last weekend, and then you got to turn around, you got to do it once again. And I understand that this is another game that might be a Super Bowl-esque game for Oregon State, but this has been a very good team this year, but there's been something missing from this team the entire year that I've felt that separates them from being a very good football team and an elite football team. And I think we're going to see that Friday against Oregon. I think we're going to see a little bit of that difference, a little bit of that separation there. And I think the Ducks are going to win. We all kind of have it around that 10 to 14 range, and I agree with it here. I got the Ducks in this one. I got Oregon 38-24. I just think that Oregon right now is playing like a very, very complete football team. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon State was able to move the football. That's why I got them scoring 24 this weekend. But I just think that there's still something missing from that Oregon State team there that's left me really not buying into them being an elite team this year, but a very good team this year. But that'll wrap up all of our picks. That'll wrap up our recap of Week 12 and our part 1 of our preview for Week 13. We went into the games that are going to be played on the weekdays. This week in Rivalry Week, we will be back at it a little later in the week on Friday. Make sure to look out for the game and the preview that we're gonna go through a lot of games for the Saturday games. We've got, as said, over 25 games we're gonna pick for those Saturday games, so make sure to tune in for that one. That'll be interesting. Obviously, we're gonna talk about the game that's got everybody's eyes in the country, including our own, the game at that. We're gonna talk about that one. Countless other rivalry matchups, the Iron Bowl, the Sunshine Showdown, just to name a few. It's going to be a great show. But for Blake, for Tyler, this is myself, Cade. That'll be all for this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. Make sure to check us out on all of our social media accounts where we post pretty regularly throughout the week, as well as you can listen and watch this podcast on Spotify and YouTube. But that'll be all for this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast.